2012 fatal shooting of Victor Ortega by a San Diego police officer was ruled justified by the DA, but a federal judge has challenged the officer's version of events. Where are the water cops? San Diego adopted tough water restrictions, but nobody's been hired to enforce them. And a proposal to cut some 4-person fire crews in half to improve response times isn't sitting well with the firefighters union. I'm Mark Sauer, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome. It's Friday, December 5th. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are 10 News investigative producer J.W. August. Hi, J.W.
Hey, Mark.
KPBS Enterprise reporter Claire Tregesser. Claire, good to have you.
Thanks, Mark.
And reporter Liam Dillon with Voice of San Diego. Hi, Liam. Welcome back.
Hi, Mark.
Well, it was a domestic violence call in Mira Mesa that turned tragic. Victor Ortega was killed in June 2012 by San Diego police officer Jonathan McCarthy. A year later, DA Bonnie DeMonis ruled the killing justified, but now a federal judge is raising serious questions about the officer's claim that he fired in self-defense. Now, JW Federal Judge Larry Burns has ruled in this case. Bring us up to date. What's the status of that now? He's allowing this family's lawsuit to go forward, right?
Right. There was a number of claims they made, and he pulled a few of them out, but he kept two very strong claims in there there's the possibility that Officer McCarthy, violated the 4th and the 14th Amendment rights of Ortega.
Okay, and these are basically constitutional rights that you...
Fair trial. You can't
right.
be, if you're dead, you can't have a fair trial, right. And abuse of power.
Okay, so this started, walk us through the events briefly here. This was a domestic violence call. Unfortunately, many such calls in a city the size of San Diego, common calls.
Right.
Officers respond in Mira Mesa to the home there.
Right.
What happened?
McCarthy saw Ortega running. He started to chase him.
Okay, so he would be the husband and accused of the abuse.
Yeah, abuse
in the 911 call.
The Judge Burns laid out in his decision on this part of it exactly what happened. They got in a fight about him not working and she not doing enough to support the family. It escalated. He swung at her and hit her lip. She was bleeding. She called the police.
So the cops are called. Okay.
Right, that's it.
Okay, and then so the officers get there and Ortega takes off and Officer McCarthy gives chase.
Right.
So
and there's a lot of things that happen in this that don't follow police procedure, which is troubling. One, the cops are not supposed to take off. They're supposed to figure out what's going on at the scene before they start chasing people. I'm not so sure McCarthy had a clear grasp on what was happening, but he took off after the guy, which may be a natural instinct for a younger officer. The whole thing took less than a minute. A minute after they pulled up, Ortega was dead. 2 shots, close range. One in the gut, one in the neck.
Now, there were witnesses in this case, but they weren't eyewitnesses. They heard it through a fence, right?
Right, ear witnesses.
And you talked to these folks here.
Well, not all of them,
okay.
But I talked to some teenagers that were on the other side of the fence. The fence was about that.
No, was it a wooden fence or a
wooden
fence? You can't see through the fence, yeah.
No,
okay.
But you surely can hear.
Okay.
Because I had the camera go on the other side and bang around a little bit. Oh yeah, you can hear this. Even I got bad hearing, I can hear it. They were right on top of them.
All right.
Plus there was there was apartments up here that there was another witness up here that heard this, but nobody saw anything.
All right. Now, why does Officer McCarthy say he shot Ortega in this instance? And again, a fatal shooting.
Protect himself. His life was in danger.
Okay. And how so?
Oh, excuse me. Right. He thought that that Ortega was coming after his gun. Okay. The story is different depending on who you talk to, whether it was his gun that he had in his ankle.
So a secondary gun, not his service weapon.
Right, yeah. Or his primary weapon.
Okay.
So there's a difference. The police's own investigators don't agree with what McCarthy said.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's go further along in the process here. Normally the district attorney will take a look at this shooting here. They'll do their own investigation. And it took a year. That's a long time, it seems.
Yes, it is.
And the DA, Bonnie DeMonis, came back and said this was a justified shooting, which is not uncommon in police shootings in this city or in any city, really.
And
as we've seen with all the national headlines here out of Missouri,
no,
New York,
they didn't find any reason to look any further.
Right.
But even in the district attorney's report, there was I was talking to Liam before this, that if I'd have known now when that came out, I might have asked more questions. Like, for instance, normally on a scene like that, a senior officer walks through the scene with the officer involved in the shooting. They didn't do it in this case. Why didn't they do it? Because the body was there. Now, that's what the DA's report said. If I'd have thought about that, I would have certainly asked their office, okay, well, why? Why didn't you walk through immediately and debrief this officer? What happened?
All right, let's take a minute here. Yeah, Liam, go ahead.
This is actually, interesting in the light of current events and what the police department is doing now with their new body cam program, which we would have an eyewitness. We would have a witness that was the officer was wearing a witness, would have been wearing a witness at the time, which would have presumably shed a lot more clarity on what happened.
Let's talk about that for just a second. For the audience who's not aware, there's a pilot program now. Officers are being fitted with cameras, body cameras. They engage a suspect. In this instance, they arrive at this call. They turn that camera on, and it simply records everything that happens in that encounter.
And what's interesting as well is the current department policy for this is that information, even in cases like this where there is a dispute, would not be made public. And so, there's clearly a dispute. Clearly, there's a lot of community interest and community concern about what happened, and we would have to trust the police department that that what the officer said or what was captured on the camera was what the reality was without seeing that in public.
Which makes you wonder what's
said. Well, the police chief has said that she, on a case-by-case basis. So it seems like in cases where maybe it clears the police officer when there are questions about what is happening, she might be willing to release it in those instances.
Well, it's entirely at her
right. It's up to her. Yeah.
Well, then the question would be, and none of us are lawyers, of course, but the question would be, in a lawsuit situation such as this, would this be discoverable? Could the plaintiffs for the family, the widow in this case, get such a tape? Of course, it's a speculation at this point what that video would have shown had there been a body cam.
Absolutely.
So let's get back to this specific case. So Judge Burns, the federal judge now, he ruled that that because of the testimony that he heard, he's going to allow this federal lawsuit to go forward, even though there's no criminal case here, because he's concerned these questions are raised about the officer's version of events squaring with the evidence.
Yeah, he says throughout his ruling, if a jury heard this, they'd have a reasonable cause to believe. Again and again, he said this on the 4th and 14th Amendment allegations by the plaintiff's attorney.
Okay. All right, very good. Now, I do want to take a step away from this case here, and we'll get back to it in a second, but we were talking about these national headlines right now and the fatal police shootings. I do want to just, for a benefit of our audience, go over a few figures here. In 2013, in Great Britain, there were 0 police shootings. Germany, just 8. Canada averages about 12 a year. For the United States, the FBI report for 2013 reported 461 fatal police shootings in the United States. Some sources say it was much higher than that. I wonder, we talk about body cams, maybe we talk about police techniques and processes in a tragedy such as this. What can be done? Why do we have so many in this country, and why do these other Western developed countries have so few?
Gun laws. And the fact that it's not so much, it bothers me about the shooting.
In other words, we have great access to guns in our society,
absolutely.
And these others don't.
And the other thing that's troubling is that it's troubling to have so many shootings, but how many times does the government find that the officer was not justified?
Right.
I just cannot believe the percentages of how many times did that happen in San Diego County? Has the sitting district attorney, I think it's one, that bought a case.
Right, and I can think of that. And I think it was like 20 years, in the last 20 years, that one case, and of course the jury favored the officer.
And not the racism had anything to do with it, but it was a black officer and a white citizen the case was bought on.
So, yeah, it is very troubling. Anyway, let's get back and we'll wrap this up. We have a few seconds left on this topic. Judge Burns' ruling was this case can go forward. They're going to have a settlement conference now to see if there's some sort of settlement. But the city wanted a summary judgment. They wanted the judge to dismiss this case.
City attorney wants it all off the books.
And the city attorney, by the way, you asked for comment on for your story on this. What was the city attorney's comment?
Basically, they can't talk about civil litigation.
Because the suit is ongoing. So where are we now? The judge will have another hearing at some point?
Now, this hearing's closed. We don't know what goes on inside. I asked the the plaintiff's attorney, can I find out? And she said, no, this thing it's very confidential. We can't find out what the settlement hearing is.
The next thing we may hear about then is a settlement.
Settlement, or they move forward.
Or they move forward to a trial. All right, very good. We'll be looking for more reports on that story, of course. Well, everyone knows that even with the recent rains this week, California is suffering through years of severe drought. So the city of San Diego initiated mandatory water restrictions on November 1st. We might ask what took so long, but the city has yet to hire people to enforce those restrictions. Now, Claire, let's start this segment by telling us who uses the most water around here.
Well, it's Rancho Santa Fe, the unincorporated neighborhood in San Diego
Very affluent
County.
area, as everyone
Yes.
knows, yeah.
And up until last month, they were actually the highest water users on average in the state.
In the state of California.
New numbers came out just a few days ago, and they dropped down to number 3. So.
Okay, and those new ones, just for the record, it's Palm Springs and I think a suburb of Anaheim that
Yes,
nobody's ever
yeah,
heard
that's
of.
right.
Okay. All right, so this very affluent area, and Liam, you worked on the same story, and New York Times did a story on it, the LA Times. This has become national news in drought-stricken California, who's, gushing their water on their lawns and slaking their horses. And what are some of the reasons up there? They got big lawns, don't they?
Just a fun fact, if you ever want to meet people from Rancho Santa Fe, go to their post office because they don't have post boxes at their individual houses. Everyone has to come to the post office to pick up their mail every day. So I hung out for about 4 hours outside the post office to ask people, hey, why are you using so much water? And everyone was really defensive. I mean, I expected
so they're
to get,
sensitive about it.
Right, really sensitive. I expected to get some people to say, who are you to question my water use? Or this is my property, I can use as much water as I want as long as I pay for it. I didn't get any of that. It was a lot of like, oh, well, we're cutting back, but the numbers don't say that. Well, we are, and then it was just a lot of defensiveness of
So are we going to see people, digging out an acre of lawn and putting in, a xeriscape garden, or what's going on?
Well, I mean, that the city of San Diego would love it if people would do that. I sat in on they do residential surveys, and someone from the city's public utilities department was saying, we have these other non-grass lawn options if you want to do that, but I don't know if that's going to be happening in Rancho Santa Fe.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of gravel up there. Right?
Yeah.
It's not just sticking out your little patch in front. You got a long way to go. They got horses. They've got big spreads.
Fruit trees. A lot of citrus trees is a big kind of history of that. There, big rolling lawns. We're talking like really, really high water bills. I mean, some of the folks I were talking to were saying for 2 months it was $1,500, $1,700, $2,000, $3,000, just a ton of money.
Poor folks can't afford that.
Water, they're going to use it. Well,
they're going to cut back.
That's a nice segue. Let's get back to the city restrictions then. So give us the high points, Claire. What are we? It's a mandatory order. What are we supposed to be doing right now?
Yes, the main thing is you're only supposed to water 3 days a week for no more than 7 minutes at a time, early in the morning or after the sun goes down. There are other things about no ornamental fountains can be turned on, when you can water plants, when you can wash your car, when you wash it yourself, not take it to a car wash, things like that.
Odd even thing where you...
residences on odd numbers have designated days, even numbers, other designated days, things like that.
Okay, so now we have a team of water cops going around and making sure these restrictions are being enforced, right?
No,
we don't. Okay.
Nope, not so far. The Public Utilities Department says so far they don't have anyone who's able to go out and proactively look for people breaking these rules, and the reason for that is they need to hire these people, but they're only temporary employees. They said that they wouldn't add anything to their budget when they went to these mandatory restrictions, so that means that they have to wait for people to leave jobs so that then they can hire people
so they can only
temporarily.
hire through attrition. Now, the city council did declare this is a crisis. We're in a drought situation. It's gone on. We're in our 3rd year, maybe 4th year by now, if you start looking, depending on where the calendar starts here. But we're waiting for attrition to actually hire some enforcement folks on.
Right, and the water resources manager says he's hoping it'll happen this month in December, so maybe then we'll begin to see people going out. And in the meantime, they do have other ways that they say that
I wanted to talk about that. So let's see what it's kind of neighbor turning in neighbor, calling down the street and whispering, "Hey, the guy down here is."
Yeah, that seems to be one of the ways. You can call, email. They have an app for your mobile phone, and you report on your neighbors or anyone that you see who's maybe running their sprinklers at the wrong time or has sprinklers that are broken, things like that. And then when someone gets a complaint about them, they receive a letter from the city saying, hey, you're breaking these rules, you need to stop. The city then also isn't able to go out and say, we sent this letter, have you stopped what you're doing? They rely on the person who originally made the report to come back in 2 weeks and say they're still doing it, in which case then the city might call them or go out and talk to them in person. If they still don't fix it, then the code compliance will send them a letter giving them 10 days to fix it. And if they still don't fix it, then they can get fined up to $500. But the city points out that this is very rare. Usually when people get the letters, apparently they
kind of
stop right
freak
away.
out a little bit and they do something about it.
Great. Neighbor on neighbor,
Gina.
I like it.
Yeah, right.
It's a good idea.
You talk about disputes in neighborhoods. Well, you can turn around and kind of do this proactively yourself. You can ask the city come out and say, hey, check it out. Have I got leaks? Tell me how I'm doing. Kind of give me a report card. And we did, you did in your feature, you talked to someone, I believe, and then we have a clip here, Victor Sandoval of the Public Utilities Department measuring water usage at a house in Pacific Beach. Let's hear a little bit of that.
So right now your water usage is 847 gallons a day. That seems like a lot of water.
Yeah, it does.
So we'll say 2 adults, so we'll put you guys at 60 gallons. That's 120 gallons a day, just adults.
Yes.
Put another 40 gallons for the kids. So we're looking at about 200 gallons a day, just interior.
Yes.
Okay. The other 600 gallons are probably going to be the outside.
Okay.
So we're going to double check all that. Don't worry, we're going to look.
My lawn doesn't look like 600.
I know.
All right, so again, they were in Pacific Beach, not Rancho Santa Fe, but those are Rancho Santa Fe numbers.
They were using more than,
yeah,
I mean, it turns out that it didn't seem like they had any leaks inside. They weren't using that much water inside, but they had a lot of broken sprinklers. And
right,
so
he found one, I remember that. He found leaking one somewhere, a real bad sprinkler.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the guy from the Public Utilities Department who's going out, he turns on each of the sprinklers and looks and says, yeah, that one's broken. I was kind of thinking, why did you need someone from the city to come out and say, yep, that looks broken?
Yeah. Now, when it's broken, then it is leaking kind of all the time, or it's just not efficient?
No, just when it's on, it's pouring water all over the sidewalk, not spraying water, but really just like dumping it out.
So, this is kind of a rote thing. How many of us day to day, if we have sprinklers on timers or, we have our garden or however we use water, do we think much about our actual usage? Are you, how long are you taking a shower? How often are you taking a shower? How often are you watering the plants, etc.? I mean, it's just something that the average person really isn't thinking that much about.
Right, and this family had their sprinklers set according to the new water restrictions.
Oh, they
had
did?
them on.
So they were aware of it.
Yeah, they had them on a little bit too long, but they did have them set. But when the sprinklers were on, they were pouring out water instead of spraying water. And I don't think that a lot of people know that the city has this survey program and anyone can call up and it's free. Right now they have a 3-week waiting list because they only have 2 employees who go out and do the things, but they'll go through your whole house and show you where your faucets are using water, everything like that.
All right, a couple seconds left. We did do pretty well, though, with the push this summer, and we have cut back some on our water usage overall, have we not?
Yeah, the city of San Diego's numbers are pretty low. We were, I think, 326 out of 400 for water companies, which is an average of 76 gallons a day. It'll be interesting to see when the November numbers come out, whether that's when the mandatory water restrictions started, whether we've actually continued to go down because of those restrictions.
All right, we're going to shift to another topic here that talks again about the city budget. Things got so bad in cash-strapped San Diego a few years ago that the city initiated brownouts for fire stations. Fire trucks and crews were idled for certain periods. Now, the brownouts soon ended, but looking for ways to save money on new fire stations and improve response times, the city turned to a consultant. The proposal cut some 4-person fire crews down to 2 and dispatched them in pickup trucks. So, Liam, let's start by telling us what the situation is with fire crews in the city. So set it up for us. We've got obviously stations that are equidistant and strategically placed around the city, and 4-member crews, you get a call and out they go.
Yep. So so the consultant said this was not enough. We need a lot more fire crews around the city, roughly 20, to meet the response time goals of the city, which is getting to a call within 7 minutes, 30 seconds, 90% of the time.
Okay,
so
and the key to that is, and we'll get into some of these figures, but most of the calls aren't really fires. Most of them are medical. Nearly 90% are medical calls.
Exactly. 88% of the calls last year were for medical
So
reasons.
we're talking about heart attacks, we're talking about critical medical situations. We got to get there, and that's why paramedics on the crew. Right. Okay.
So the consultant said, well, there's no way you're building 20 new fire stations at $12 million a pop. So maybe we can serve some of these areas by making these two-person crews, which should be a lot cheaper. The city has piloted one in Encano starting in July, and that cost is $700,000. And so you put $700,000 on one hand and $12 million on another, and that's a big distinction.
And again, the two-person, one of those people is a paramedic.
Correct. Yeah.
Trained medical emergency person, and they're going out in much smaller vehicles.
That's right.
I think a lot of people wonder if you've called 911 or had somebody in your family unfortunately had to call 911, especially on a medical thing, a fire truck shows up.
That's right.
And the reason is, it's what I was saying at the outset. They're equidistant. They have to be there.
There are more fire personnel in the city than there are, say, ambulances. And so we have these fire personnel. There aren't as many fires as there used to be, and so you might as well use them.
Right.
They go to medical emergencies. And, on each crew, there's at least one person cross-trained as a paramedic.
So they do the emergency thing. They call in. They, in instance, say, this is happening. We're going to load. And then generally maybe an ambulance crew comes a few minutes later. They hand it off, stabilize the person. Patient goes off to the hospital. That's kind of a typical call. So sounds great. We got these smaller vehicles, two people. We're saving money. We're getting out there. The response times are better.
Yeah.
What's not to like?
You have to ask the fire union, because they're the ones who really seem to have the most trouble with it. Their argument is, essentially that, well, since these crew in Encano is only around 12 hours a day, you're not getting as much service as you would get from a four-person crew. The folks in Encano deserve a four-person crew the same way folks in the rest of the city do. Things of that nature. And so they're basically saying, look, it's a standard to have 4 people on an engine and 4 people to respond, and so that's what we should have.
Do we have any sense whether people in Encanto know or care that they're being served by a 2-person crew instead of a 4-person
So there's
crew?
a good gentleman who was a former high-level guy in the fire department who lives in Canada. He's been very, very happy with what's been going on so far.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because response times have been cut in half according to initial numbers, and so that means people are getting there more quickly.
Okay, you mentioned this pilot program started in July.
Correct.
So I imagine as part of that, there's going to be, getting to Claire's question, surveys, analysis, and they're keeping
Absolutely.
records
So
of
it isn't
everything
just the
that will be
numbers.
done.
Obviously, getting there is a big number. You want to get someone there quickly, but you also do have to evaluate what sort of medical attention these folks are receiving, whether it's better or worse, or to what extent. And so that there are some more detailed stats that are supposed to be coming out
Yeah, it's
soon.
a bird in the hand, worth 2 in the bush. Is it worth it getting those people out there now and giving them coverage? It kind of makes sense. But I also understand why the union would want more people on the trucks. I mean, that's what unions do.
Unions do. They're protecting jobs, and they want more personnel.
That's why we got the system we have now. It's evolved over the years. I've often wondered, why do we have to send paramedics out on every run? Or firemen on every paramedic run.
Right.
But that's,
and so what was it the head of the firefighters union wrote to Voice of San Diego? Is that right? And he made this argument that it's actually you're paying double or something like that.
Right. So his argument is that since these crews only run for 12 hours a day, as opposed to the 4-person crews running all day, their cost is actually more than you would get on sort of a per person basis than you would get from a 4-person crew. So it's actually a taxpayer hit to use these crews. Again, certainly in the absolute, you're paying less than you would be paying for a 4-person crew, but he says sort of per capita basis, taxpayers aren't served as well.
All right, now you did a fact check on that, and you took a look at what his claims were. Do they hold water?
Well, it's misleading. I mean, what he's basically doing is divorcing the capital cost of building a new fire station from this process. And the city, when you have basically a pickup truck, it's a lot easier to house that than it would be a full 4-person engine crew. And so right now the city's paying minimal cost to house this 4-person truck. This 2-person crew in Encanto would have to spend, roughly $11 million to build a new fire station in that community. And so if you don't talk about the capital costs, you're really not seeing the whole picture.
I see. Now, are there other middle opportunities here? I know in my neighborhood here, not far from where we are, in Del Cerro, they refurbished and spent a lot of money on the fire station 31 there at one time. And for about 14 months, they housed the crew there, and they ran their calls right out of a kind of a Quonset hut on some city-owned land.
Right.
Don't they have that kind of a middle cost option? City has a lot of parcels. They can set up some temporary places.
Sure,
that are
there's
cheaper.
one is being replaced with a full engine in a full station in Mission Valley, and then there's a new one coming, supposed to come online on January 1st, so relatively soon, in Skyline, which should also be sort of this trailer situation where there's some city-owned land there, and there would be a temporary 4-person engine crew running out of that station.
Okay, but the firefighters union isn't
Likes
crazy
that.
about. Oh, they like that because you have the 4 crew.
That's right, and their argument again is that's full service for the community.
All right. Now you have the firefighter union folks have an ally at City Hall, right?
Right.
I mean, there's
more than one.
But there's one powerful councilwoman,
Right.
Marty Emerald, and she's the Public Safety Committee, right? Her Balawick here, and what's she saying? She's kind of siding with the firefighters.
This was roughly 6 to 8 months ago when this big conversation happened. This is before the Encano crew was funded in the budget, so this is before the benefit experience. But her argument at the time was, I'd rather spend the $2 million, roughly $2.5 million, on this temporary crew in temporary 4-person crew in Skyline than the $600,000-$700,000 in Encanto. The new mayor, Kevin Faulkner, did both, but her choice is, if I had to choose one, I would choose the Skyline version. But in doing so, she really used some misleading terminology and arguments to make the case that the crews were a bad thing, and that sort of did a bit of a disservice to the argument.
All right, we got a few seconds left. Where do we stand now? When is the council going to get another report or see what the empirical situation is from the pilot
Sure. When I spoke
program?
with the fire chief, he said, within a few months. Also, interestingly, the mayor has signaled his intention to fund a second 2-person crew. It's unsure where that will go, but he definitely wants to do it. He's encouraged with the results.
Okay, so and then of course, as Claire raised that issue, they'll get some feedback and some surveys from the public and folks who've actually dealt
Quick
with it.
question: How about long-term the actual fire stations? Is there anything in the pipeline on that?
Yeah, there's a few. They just got some money for this bond, the most recent bond, and they're starting to fund some design for some. One particularly in City Heights around Home Avenue, which is the greatest risk for delivery.
All right, we are out of time. That does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, J.W. August of 10 News, Claire Tregesser of KPBS News, and Liam Dillon of Voice of San Diego. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.